This right here is the Marvel Rivals art book. Probably my favorite art book that I own currently, but it's got some pretty stiff competition. I've got a lot of art books that I like. And it's gonna come in really handy today, as I'm going to be doing this month's PopCross Community Redraw, in which my subscribers were sending in their own original DC Comics supervillains. So why the Marvel Rivals book for a DC episode? Well, I've been having a ton of fun doing lots of cross-franchise superhero kinds of fusions in the last month in my Art and Antics series, of which this video is a part. So I thought it'd be fun to take some of my subscribers' submissions, then flip through the Rivals book and find a character with a similar aesthetic or vibe, and kind of fuse the two characters together, flesh out my subscribers' own submission using elements of the Marvel Rivals characters and designs. I think this is gonna be a lot of fun, so let's get on to the first submission.
Hit like if you want, subscribe if you feel like, but either way, enjoy the show.
We're going to kick things off today with a submission from Samuel, who sent in a character called Supernova that's kind of like a toxic Supergirl sort of character. Feels fitting to start with this since this month's redraw revolved around DC characters because Supergirl also came out this month. Samuel's submission had elements of magic worked into the lore, which I'll get more into once we're in the drawing. So that, paired with the vibe of the character, pretty quickly got me thinking of Scarlet Witch, whose Marvel Rivals design I really love, along with a bunch of her skins. I think I actually like her white-ish outfit the best, but looking at these two characters, it didn't feel quite right. So the next character to come to mind to fuse this toxic Supergirl with was one that I definitely think is a better pairing, and that is Magik, or Ileana Rasputin. I personally never play her in Marvel Rivals because I've tried her out and I'm just terrible with close-range characters, but I do love her character in the comics, and her design in this is really awesome, so I think this is going to be a good pairing. Now, as requested, Samuel submitted some cool lore to go along with this character that weaves in both Superman and Batman kinds of characters into the tale. She was created by Lex Luthor in a similar way to how Lex Luthor created Superboy. Superboy was made as a clone of a mix of Superman and Lex Luthor's DNA. I mean, this may depend on the continuity. It's the version I'm familiar with, but, you know, comic characters' origins change a lot. But of course, Superboy ended up becoming a hero, so Lex Luthor tried again, but used Supergirl's DNA and created Supernova here. But the experiment ended up failing, or at least he thought it did, so the clone died, the body was discarded, and then it was actually taken by the League of Assassins, who more commonly show up in Batman stories led by Ra's al Ghul, and they put the clone's body into the Lazarus Pit, which is what Ra's al Ghul uses to have an immortal lifespan, and has brought characters back to life such as Red Hood, and that ends up resurrecting this clone, but it also ends up having some of the magic of the Lazarus Pit mixes in with her abilities, her Kryptonian DNA, and gives her a sort of altered magic Kryptonian kind of set of abilities. So she gets these like toxic gas attacks, she's immune to kryptonite, then has a lot of the common stuff like the super speed, flight, and all that kind of stuff as well. She ends up getting directly adopted by Ra's al Ghul and goes by the name Kira al Ghul, and ends up being the most dangerous member of the League of Assassins, and someone that the Justice League definitely would not want working with a guy like Ra's al Ghul. And honestly, I think, not to toot my own horn with the decision I made for fusions, but I think Magik's elements from Marvel Rivals just really help flesh out this design a little bit more. Not that there was anything wrong with the original, but the pairing of Magik's vibe, just adding some of her little suit details into this. I also took inspiration from Magik's proportions. She's very tall and lean, got the punky sort of villain kind of vibe that, you know, it's Magik herself isn't exactly a villain. I mean, you know, again, depends on the storyline. She's usually more of a hero, but she definitely has a kind of villain look to her, so that merged really well with this character, and I think this ends up being a really cool one to kick off the video with, so thank you very much for the submission, Samuel. Let's take a look at the finished result. Second up for today, we have a submission from B1Artist985, or by Artist985, and it is a heavily armored character named Dr. Crab. Because he appears to be a water-based character at first, because, you know, crab. I thought maybe Namor would be a good fitting fusion for him, but Namor in his core design doesn't really have much in the way of armor, and Dr. Crab here is completely decked out in armor other than his pants. So as cool as Namor is, I felt like Iron Man was actually a better match for Dr. Crab to pull some visual inspiration. Iron Man has tons of cool designs in the Marvel Rivals game, his main suit is awesome, his other suits are cool, and I knew very quickly looking at a few of the designs in this book that I was gonna pull inspiration from a few different suits of his. Also, yes, if I had a nickel for every time I fused a Marvel Rivals design with a crab character in my Art and Antics series, blah blah blah, 2 nickels, weird that it happened twice. Now, something that really stood out about this submission for me was in the lore. When I started reading it, I assumed this guy was just going to be a villain for Aquaman because he's got a crab, aquatic kind of motif to him, but it turns out this guy's actually a villain for the Flash, and that made me think, oh, this guy would actually stand out quite nicely among the Flash's roster because he's an aquatic-based character. You stick him in Aquaman's rogues gallery and he'd kind of just blend in with characters like Black Manta or someone like that. The lore for this guy has him working for Star Labs originally, which various iterations of the Flash have worked for, and he's specifically a marine biologist and a brilliant inventor who makes this armor to be used to allow people to go deeper down into the depths of the ocean without getting crushed or getting injured or anything like that to study marine life, but when he first builds it, the person who tests it out ends up dying in it. Dr. Ken Sarnos Crab is then fired, and out of vengeance, he rebuilds the suit and uses it to become a supervillain. He uses the suit to try and rob a bank because he's got no other means of income at the moment, and of course that's the first time he comes up against the Flash. Along with the suit being able to handle intense pressure, meaning it's extremely durable, it gives him super strength and enhanced speed, obviously not to the level of the Flash, but then of course he's also got this big crushing crab claw as well, which I knew was going to be a fun design element to play with. One of the silly things with this one that I'm like, I like how it looks, but it is kind of silly when you take a moment to think about it, is the fact that this guy's got regular pants over part of his armor, because presumably he's also got armor under those pant legs as well. So I probably could have just leaned into doing full body armor, but I thought it would be a nice way to break up some of the texture and design to have the pants in there. And this was also an interesting challenge for me, playing around with the new art style that I've been developing ever since I started the Art and Antics series. I was trying to figure out a good way to render armor in this new style, and I played around with some ideas that I kind of like. I don't think I've quite nailed it yet, but I can feel myself getting closer, working in elements of my old rendering style with this one to find something that works really nicely. I think I'm getting there. It's getting nicer every time I play around with it, and I'm excited to see where it goes from here. Maybe I should do a full episode around armors or something to really lock that in. I make some tweaks to the colors after the recording finishes to add a little bit more variety, and once it's all wrapped up, I end up being quite pleased with this one. Now, given I needed something to do while I showed off the submissions sent in by my subscribers for this episode, and I haven't made any food in any of the recent Art and Antics episodes, I decided to film myself making one of my current favorite meals for breakfast today to go alongside the community redraw scroll. It's somewhat fitting given this is a superhero episode, and this is the kind of meal that can help get you a superhero physique, as I discussed in a recent episode about how I got into shape this year. Basically, this is like a sweet potato burger bowl. First, I cooked up some sweet potato with a little bit of oil on the bottom so it caramelizes. Sweet potato isn't super calorie dense, but it is both tasty and very filling, while also having a lot of healthy vitamins, and it's supposed to be good for your skin or something. I honestly forget all the details of it, but it's good for you. And regardless of whatever all the details are, it makes for a perfect base for this meal. Then I cook up some onions and apples with a bit of hot honey and garlic. Absolutely killer combo that I'm using all the time lately. And once that's cooked up a bit, I throw in some either ground beef, ground pork, or ground turkey, and cook that up too. Always going extra lean when I'm having beef or pork, because it's got better calorie to protein ratio. I also cut up some pickles and jalapenos, mix that together, then put all of that on top of the mashed up sweet potato, And finally, I cook up one regular egg with a bunch of added egg whites. Egg whites are super high protein and super low calorie, so they're great for muscle building, but I also want a bit of the healthy fats from the egg yolk, hence having a regular full egg in there as well. You chuck that on top too with a bunch of ketchup or mustard or whatever you want to put on, and you have got a super healthy protein-packed meal that is delicious, filling, and good for you, and it works for breakfast, lunch, dinner, really whenever you want to eat it. So once I enjoy gobbling this whole thing up, we can move on to the next drawing. Moving on to round 3, we have a submission from Good Witch Kirby of a character called Neo-Themis. Once again, Scarlet Witch came to mind for fusing with this character, but given this character's main weapon seems to be floating swords, there was a much more obvious choice in mind in Hela. Once again, this is a character I never really play myself, but that's certainly not due to a lack of cool design elements in her main outfit or in the various other skins she has in the game. Now, Neo-Themis here was made as an artificial human in a similar way to how Wonder Woman was created, but this character was created by an existing DC Comics character named Veronica Cale, who I wasn't actually familiar with before reading this lore, but Veronica Cale is generally a Wonder Woman villain from what I've read, though in this context she's working with a wider group of villains to go against the Justice League, and Veronica Cale had this character created specifically to be a counter to Wonder Woman and to serve out Veronica's own brand of justice. There was also a clever thing worked into her creation, which requires some context for people that don't know Wonder Woman's origins as well. This may not actually be canon anymore, but Wonder Woman was originally formed from clay by her mother, then brought to life by the gods. I think in modern continuity, it's been changed where that was a story she was told as a child that she believed, but it didn't actually turn out to be true. But regardless, I really like that Good Witch Kirby kind of worked that into this character, in that this character is formed from a bunch of different elements that relate to multiple different Justice League villains. So she was formed from clay that was taken from Clayface, and also imbued with elements of something called the Still Force, which is a counter to the Speed Force, apparently, which is how Flash gets his powers. There's some Green Lantern stuff in there around the energy of fear being imbued into this character, and it's just like a whole mash of different Justice League villains fused into one character for her creation. So she ends up having a ton of different superpowers: speed, flight, durability, energy construction like Green Lantern has, hence the floating swords. But the one flaw in her creation was that she was unintentionally made blind. Though personally, given all the abilities she has, I can't figure that's gonna end up being too much of a problem for her, and she'll be able to work around that pretty easily. Now, I didn't really end up putting that much of Hela into this design, though I did pull direct inspiration for the pose of this character from one of the key pieces of art of Hela from Marvel Rivals, but more so than that, I was just playing around with some design elements from the broader Marvel Rivals art style. I wasn't trying to replicate it directly, but playing around with some pieces, most notably something I've played around with a bit before, and I don't know why I don't use it more, because I really like the result. At the point where a part of cel-shaded shadow or lighting stops, they'll add a little bit of extra highlight to make it feel like a sharper angle and not a rounded surface. And that, funny enough for the character I'm drawing here, to me has always made Marvel Rivals characters look a little bit like they're molded out of clay. And I don't know if it's just me seeing that, if other people would probably describe it a different way, but I really like just adding those little highlights on different edges that normally I would think of as rounded surfaces to instead make them a little bit sharper. I think it's especially effective and cool looking in this drawing, and I'm super happy with how this one turned out because I was playing around with those. Finally, the character that I'm probably going to tease in the intro of this video, from Isaac Harrison, we have Slusher. And, I mean, there was never really much debate in my mind of who I was going to fuse this guy with. A part of me kind of considered bringing in the newly revealed Carnage design from Marvel's new fighting game, Marvel Tokon Fighters, to shake things up a little bit, but I mean, I can always do a full video around that game itself in the future. For now, I'll stick with Rivals because a Venom Slusher fusion I think is gonna be sick. Now, Slusher here is a villain to a less well-known DC Comics character by the standards of broad pop culture knowledge, essentially just meaning she's never shown up in a movie. She's well known to comic fans, and that's Zatana. This guy was actually originally a magic user and used his magic for petty crimes, until he made the mistake of trying to rob a bank in Gotham and ended up getting chased down by a team-up of Batman and Zatana. In the process of them trying to take him down, though, in a similar vein to the Joker, he falls into a vat of acid. In the chaos of trying to save himself, he ends up doing a spell that does save him, but also fuses the acid around him with his own body, turning him into this amorphous kind of character in a similar vein to Venom, who can stretch his limbs out, reshape his limbs, turn into different shapes, and also his body is a very acidic goo. Now, I'll be honest, when I first saw Marvel Rivals Venom, while I really liked the majority of his design, I was never a huge fan of the shape of the head. But now that I've drawn a version of it, I don't know, that made something click in my brain where now I kind of am a big fan of that more stretched out Venom mouth. I was referencing various different skins of Venoms from the game, but mainly just pulled inspiration from the original, and one thing that I'm still hesitant about whether or not I did the right thing for this drawing is in Slusher's original design, you can see his bones through his acid flesh. Like his body is more translucent, and that would have been a cool thing to work in here, and I had originally intended to, but I was really liking how the rendering turned out on this one, and I didn't think the extra details underneath the skin was going to enhance it, more so it was just going to kind of muddy up my version of the design. So it's still a bit of a toss-up in my head of whether or not that was the right decision, but regardless, I am super happy with how this drawing turned out, and I hope Isaac and everyone else enjoys it too. Well, we have got our background for the next month, and I know we just did a superhero, supervillain kind of related redraw, but I cannot resist, given Spider-Man Brand New Day is going to be coming out at the end of the month. For the July PopCross Community Redraw, I want anyone who wants to participate to send in your own original Spider-Sona. That's right, we're bringing back this trend. Turn yourself into a Spider-Man character, and I actually just recently did 2 of my own in one of my latest Art and Antic videos. Link's up on screen if you want to check that out. Instructions will be up on screen, but besides that, that's all for today, except of course for ending this video on some kind of positive or inspiring note, and the thought I want to leave people with is a quote that I saw just in a folder on my phone and I really liked it. It is that a beast is someone who can go through hell and simply be grateful that their legs are working. Just good encouragement for when you're going through difficult situations, to be grateful for the things that are working in your favor, and keeping a focus on those to help you get through the difficulties, and get stronger as you go through them. I hope that's inspiring, I love you all, and I'll see you all in the next video on Friday. Goodbye!